Hackers find hole in Krispy Kreme donut's cybersecurity. Donut chain Krispy Kreme says it has been hit by a cyber attack which has disrupted its online systems. Some customers in the U.S. have been unable to make online orders as a result of the hack, which occurred in late November but has only just been disclosed. Krispy Kreme revealed the attack in a regulatory filing with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) on Wednesday. It said the incident was reasonably likely to have a material impact on the firm's business operations, but clarified that brick-and-mortar shops remain open. "We're experiencing certain operational disruptions due to a cybersecurity incident, including with online ordering in parts of the United States," reads a message on the Krispy Kreme website. "We know this is an inconvenience and are working diligently to resolve the issue." The firm told the BBC in a statement it immediately took steps to investigate and contain the incident and has brought in cybersecurity experts. "We, along with them, continue to work diligently to respond to and mitigate the impact from the incident, including the restoration of online ordering," it said. No groups have publicly taken responsibility for the hack. Krispy Kreme is a large chain in the U.S., which has more than 1,400 shops worldwide. In the UK it is smaller, but its 120 locations make it the largest specialty donut retailer in the country. Krispy Kreme stated in its SEC filing that it has cybersecurity insurance, which it expects to offset a portion of the costs. It said it expected these costs to arise from a loss of digital sales, fees for the experts it has hired, and the restoration of impacted systems. Cyber attacks have caused serious disruption this year, plaguing key infrastructure including hospitals and transport systems. The proliferation of cyber attacks in 2024 shows that hackers are willing to target anything and everything, said Spencer Starkey, from cybersecurity firm SonicWall. "It's vital every single business has a robust roadmap in place to deploy if and when an attack happens," he added. Social media is taking this incident somewhat less seriously, however. "Anyone messing with Krispy Kreme should be jailed for life," joked one user on X. "Cyber criminals, you've gone too far this time," posted another.
Anger after Indian startup pretends to sack stressed staff. An Indian beauty service startup has found itself in the eye of the storm for a publicity campaign aimed at highlighting workplace stress. A few days ago, an internal email from Yes Madam went viral on social media, in which employees were informed that the company had decided to part ways with those who had reported feeling stressed at work. But on Tuesday, the startup clarified that it hadn't fired anyone and that the social media posts were part of a planned effort to highlight the serious issue of workplace stress. The campaign has sparked mixed reactions online, with some praising it for drawing attention to an important topic and others criticizing the company for misleading people and toying with their emotions. Some users also pointed out that the campaign had succeeded in propelling an almost unheard-of brand into the limelight in a matter of hours. Free promotion done right, huh? Who needs a marketing budget when you have outrage as your social media manager, one user posted on LinkedIn. This isn't the first time that a startup has courted controversy for indulging in a questionable publicity campaign. Last month, the founder of an Indian food delivery platform received bouquets and brickbats after he posted a job opening for the position of chief of staff, but said that the candidate would not be paid for a year and would instead have to donate 2 million rupees to the company's non-profit venture that aims to provide food to the poor. He later claimed that more than 10,000 people had applied for the job but didn't mention if anyone had actually been hired for the post. In February, a celebrity faced massive backlash online after she feigned her death to draw attention to cervical cancer. Many users said that the publicity stunt was deeply traumatizing to those who had actually lost friends and family to the illness. The marketing agency responsible for the campaign later apologized, but these controversies haven't stopped brands from pushing the limits of advertising to bizarre levels. Brand experts say that while such marketing gimmicks might help a brand shoot into the limelight, it does not necessarily boost the longevity or success of the company. On the contrary, it might do it more harm than good. Brands need to understand the difference between exaggeration and telling a blatant lie, says Karthik Srinivasan, a branding and communications consultant. Exaggeration is an accepted and successful advertising strategy, where a brand uses creative license to push the limits of the truth to make a point, he says. But the exaggeration is so obvious or conspicuous that a consumer isn't likely or expected to believe it, he adds. He gives the example of the Axe deodorant ads, which would often show a scrawny-looking man transforming into a magnet for women as soon as he sprays himself with the deodorant. Then there was rapper Snoop Dogg, who made headlines last year for announcing that he would be giving up smoke, only to reveal that he was actually talking about using a smokeless fire pit of a particular brand. In both instances, the exaggerations are so extreme that they are almost comically unrealistic. But telling a blatant lie has no place in ethical advertising, Mr. Srinivasan says. Brands engage in such extreme campaigns because they can garner massive publicity while using little to no funds. The idea is to pick topics that are likely to evoke strong opinions, thereby ensuring that people engage with the campaign, whether they like it or not, Mr. Srinivasan says. In the case of the viral campaign by the beauty startup, the company's email touched a chord with many professionals, who then shared it on their LinkedIn or X, formerly Twitter, profiles, criticizing the company for its insensitivity and lack of care towards its employees. Firing someone for being stressed at work is a serious issue and was definitely going to evoke strong reactions, Mr. Srinivasan explains. But such campaigns can damage a brand or a company's reputation in the eyes of its employees and consumers, he adds. Credibility and trust take time to build, and a brand will find it hard to shake off the negative publicity that comes with an insensitive ad campaign. Mayank Sehgal, a marketing consultant, echoes a similar view. It's crucial for brands to prioritize ethical marketing practices and avoid using people's emotions as a tool for self-promotion, he says. While attention-grabbing tactics may work in the short term, they ultimately erode trust and damage brand reputation.
Week 14 of the NFL season began with a great Thursday night matchup between the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. The Lions came out on top with a 34-31 win. On Sunday, the Minnesota Vikings coasted past the Atlanta Falcons, quarterback Bryce Young, and the Carolina Panthers upset a 10 fell flat to the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Miami Dolphins won an overtime thriller over the New York Jets. In the later games, the Los Angeles Rams overpowered the Buffalo Bills, and the Seattle Seahawks secured a series sweep over the Arizona Cardinals. The Kansas City Chiefs took advantage of the Buffalo loss by beating the Los Angeles Chargers on Sunday night, expanding their lead in the AFC number 1 seed race to 2 games. Then on Monday night, the Cincinnati Bengals snapped a 3-game losing streak by beating the Dallas Cowboys. Our NFL Nation reporters reacted to all the action, answering lingering questions coming out of each game and detailing everything else you need to know for every team. Let's get to it. Does this change anything about the rest of Cincinnati's season? Not really. Even with a win, the Bengals are still on the outside of the playoff race. Were it not for an awful special teams miscue in which the Cowboys mishandled a block punt, Cincinnati likely loses to a sub-.500 Dallas team. Instead, Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase did enough to deliver a victory. But there are still very real questions about the players who surround them. Early prediction for next week. Chase Brown will continue to be featured heavily in the game plan. Brown earned praise from Burrow in his post-game news conference and has given Cincinnati some much-needed explosiveness. That was evident in a 19-yard touchdown reception in the first half. What we learn about the QB today: Burrow will play through pain even in a broken season. He said he believes he injured the bursa sac in his left knee, which required the use of a compression sleeve to reduce swelling. But he was determined to finish the game and play out this season, even if a postseason run isn't on the horizon. How do the Cowboys bounce back from this? It will be tough. The playoffs are just about out of reach at 5-8. Just do the math, Coach Mike McCarthy said after game. We're not even back to even. We're still in a hole. The disappointments were numerous. The late-game special teams gaffe, the devastating right knee injury to linebacker DeMarvion Overshown, the 6th loss at home, the missed opportunities in a game they had to have. So far, McCarthy has kept things together, but this will be his biggest challenge. Describe the game in 2 words: painful loss. The Cowboys went from being in position to win with a late drive after a deflected punt to losing on the ensuing muff of the deflection. In a season in which everything that can go wrong has gone wrong for Dallas, this loss was brutal. Players kept Amani Oruwariye, who muffed the ball the Bengals recovered, from answering questions post-game. Others were concerned by the serious injury Overshown suffered in the second half. Biggest hole in the game plan: the Cowboys opted not to have Trayvon Diggs or Darren Bland travel with Chase. If they tried to double him every play, that did not work either. A star player making big plays is nothing new, but the Cowboys did not do enough to make Chase work for his numbers. He either got lost in zone coverages or was able to beat single coverage far too often. Will the lack of a consistent pass rush be the Chiefs' fatal flaw this season? It very well could be. Despite their ability to find a way to win, the Chiefs have struggled to generate pressure on opposing quarterbacks all season without blitzing, and that was especially problematic against the Chargers. The Chiefs put pressure on Justin Herbert 5 times in 26 drawbacks when they didn't blitz. It's little wonder he picked them apart in the second half. What we learn about the QB today: Patrick Mahomes can thrive when he has to get rid of the ball quickly, as he did against the Chargers because of lousy pass protection. According to NFL Next Gen Stats, Patrick Mahomes was 14 of 15 for 97 yards and a 9-yard touchdown pass to DeAndre Hopkins when throwing within 2.5 seconds in the first half alone. Describe the game in 2 words: second half struggle. The Chiefs, for the third straight week, allowed their opponent to rally from a double-digit second half deficit. The Chiefs shut out the Chargers in the first half, but Herbert took Los Angeles on scoring drives on each of its first 3 possessions in the second half. Will the Chargers' inconsistencies on offense keep them from contention? The Chargers came into this game tied for 29th in the NFL in second half scoring, 8.3. LA didn't score a touchdown in a 17-13 win over the Falcons last Sunday. Cornerback Tarheeb Still's pick six was the team's only score that day and kept the Chargers afloat. On Sunday, the Chargers' offense eventually showed up, but it was too late. After being shut out in the first half, the Chargers scored 14 points in the third quarter, the most they've scored in the third all season. Still, it wasn't enough. If the Chargers look to make a deep playoff run, their offensive struggles may be what holds them back. Most surprising performance: Quentin Johnston. Johnston had struggled in recent weeks with drops, but his first catch of the game came on a 21-yard reception that he held onto despite a thundering hit from safety Nick Bolton. Bolton was flagged for unnecessary roughness. Johnston caught 5 passes for 48 yards and a touchdown on Sunday. Early prediction for next week: the Chargers will score their most points in a game this season. The Chargers appeared to have found something in the second half Sunday, combining effective rushing with timely play action. With wide receiver Ladd McConkey potentially back, the Chargers could continue the momentum against the Buccaneers. Can the Rams' offense build on their performance and power a late playoff run? The Rams' offense did get help from special teams, but Los Angeles' 44 points are its most this season. This is a high-powered offense the Rams believe they had entering the season before the unit was quickly hit with injuries, as they shredded the Bills for 457 total yards on 9 possessions. Now that the unit is healthy, the question is whether the Rams can string together some more of these performances. LA's Week 15 opponent, the 49ers, entered Sunday ranked 9th in defensive DVOA. The Rams enter that matchup only a game behind the 8-5 Seahawks in the NFC West. Most surprising performance: the Rams were 11 of 15 on third down against the Bills, an area they were struggling in. Entering Sunday, they were converting third downs 33% of the time, which was the third worst rate in the NFL, according to ESPN research. Eye-popping stat: inside linebacker Jacob Hummel's blocked punt, which was returned for a touchdown by tight end Hunter Long, was the Rams' first blocked punt since Week 7 of 2018, according to ESPN research. It was also the Rams' first blocked punt return touchdown since Week 3 of 2018. How concerned should the Bills be after their defense was exposed by the Rams? There should be some concern. The Bills allowed scores on 6 of 9 possessions. The run defense allowed 94 rushing yards in the first half, while the team's league-leading 14-game streak with at least one takeaway ended. Buffalo pressured Stafford on 30% of throws, but it wasn't enough as he consistently found receivers downfield. With a road game at the 12-1 Lions next and seeding on the line, fixing this quickly is imperative. Most surprising performance: the Bills' special teams. In a close game like this, the blocked punt touchdown in the second quarter made a huge difference. It was the first time the Bills had a punt blocked since Week 14 of 2022. It ultimately contributed to the Rams building an early double-digit lead that Buffalo couldn't erase. Eye-popping stat: quarterback Josh Allen is the second player in NFL history to record 3 passing touchdowns and 3 rushing touchdowns in a game. He joins Hall of Famer Otto Graham, who pulled off the feat in the Browns' 56-10 NFL championship game victory over the Lions in 1954. Where do the Seahawks rank in the NFC hierarchy? They'll soon find out with home games against the Packers and Vikings over the next 2 weeks. But the question for the Seahawks is shifting from whether they'll make the playoffs to how deep they can go. They now lead Arizona by 2 games and hold the tiebreaker, while the Rams, whom Seattle plays in Week 18, are a game behind. According to ESPN Analytics, the Seahawks odds are now 64% to make the playoffs and 62% to win the NFC West. Winning the division could set up a wild card rematch at home versus either Green Bay or Minnesota. Most surprising performance. Seattle's run game came alive despite not having Kenneth Walker III. The Seahawks entered Sunday averaging 90.5 rushing yards per game and 4.1 per carry. But even without their best back, they exploded for 176 yards and averaged 5.7 yards per carry. Zach Charbonnet led the way with 134 yards and 2 touchdowns. What we learn about the QB today: Geno Smith can keep his patience. Checkdowns and other short throws were often there, and he, 24 of 30, 233 yards, 1 touchdown, repeatedly took them since they had a lead, and he didn't need to force the ball downfield. Smith has 13 interceptions on the year, but none in the past 2. How do the Cardinals survive Kyler Murray's interceptions? They can't seem to figure out a way. Murray threw 2 on Sunday, marking the first time in his career he threw multiple interceptions in consecutive games, both of which were losses. In order to counteract Murray's picks, Arizona's defense needed to make a stop, which they couldn't do either time Sunday, as Seattle scored 2 touchdowns off the turnovers. It's one thing for Murray to throw a pick, which happens, but when the opponent can capitalize on it, that makes it difficult for Arizona to bounce back. Most surprising performance. It took until the 5:29 mark of the third quarter for tight end Trey McBride to get his first catch of the game. McBride was coming off a 3-game stretch of 71, 133, and 96 yards, respectively. He eventually finished with 7 catches for 70 yards. Early prediction for next week. McBride will be involved earlier in the game. Yes, he had 3 targets before his first catch Sunday, but none of them hit. Murray will make sure to give McBride a couple of catches early against the Patriots to set the tone. McBride makes things happen when the ball is in his hands. What does Sunday's blowout win mean for the 49ers? Not as much as they'd like. For the first time in a long time, the Niners looked like the juggernaut many expected them to be entering the season. While a comfortable win was much needed, the 49ers didn't gain any ground in the NFC West given Seattle's win over Arizona. Sunday's victory also came against a Bears team in disarray, which makes it hard to believe this is a sign of a team on the verge of a surge. If San Francisco can beat the Rams on Thursday, it would be a much better indicator that San Francisco can still make the playoffs. Most surprising performance. Running back Isaac Guerendo. The rookie made the most of his first start in place of the injured Christian McCaffrey, knee, and Jordan Mason, ankle. He had 78 rushing yards on 15 carries for 2 touchdowns and was a solid pass threat with 50 yards on 2 receptions. A fourth quarter foot injury put a damper on his day, but it was a promising opening act. The 49ers think Guerendo has a sprained foot, and he will undergo an MRI on Monday. Eye-popping stat: the first half was the most lopsided half in the NFL this season, as San Francisco was up 24-0 at halftime. The 49ers posted 319 yards, the most by any team in the opening 30 minutes this season. The Bears managed just 4 yards, the fewest by any team in 2024. The 315-yard margin was the highest by a 49ers team in any half over the past 40 seasons. How did the Bears manage to look worse after firing coach Matt Eberflus? Chicago experienced no bump after firing Eberflus and promoting Thomas Brown to interim coach. The Bears were outgained by 315 yards, mustered 1 first down, and were shut out in the first half, which felt similar to how things transpired in their disastrous loss in Detroit. But unlike the Lions game, Chicago mustered no real comeback. Rookie receiver Rome Odunze was the lone bright spot with 2 touchdowns in the Bears' 7th straight loss, but his efforts were for naught as this game was basically over at halftime. Describe the game in 2 words: total domination. The 49ers hadn't scored 5 touchdowns in a game this season until Sunday. Chicago had the number 1 red zone defense and allowed San Francisco to convert on 5 trips inside the 20. The 49ers sacked quarterback Caleb Williams 7 times and limited the Bears to 3.2 yards per play. Biggest hole in the game plan. Why was George Kittle always wide open? The Bears defense allowed 8 plays of 20-plus yards, 4 of which were catches by the 49ers tight end. He became the 3rd tight end to record a 100-yard game on Chicago's defense this season. TJ Hawkinson, and Evan Engram, which is the most such performances by any team through 14 weeks. What's the ceiling for the Steelers? With the win against the Browns, the Steelers emerged from a 4-game divisional gauntlet with a 2-game lead in the division. Though they secured another 10-win season, the Steelers have their sights set on much bigger goals, like winning their first playoff game since 2016 and hosting their first playoff game since 2020. They have a championship-caliber defense, leading the NFL in takeaways. The Browns had 3 turnovers on Sunday and holding opponents to fewer than 19 points per game. And the offense has shown an ability to adjust and thrive with Russell Wilson at quarterback. What we learn about the QB today. Though he struggled against Cleveland's pass rush early, Wilson shook off a rocky first half to throw 2 third-quarter touchdowns. The Browns pressured Wilson on 39% of dropbacks in the first half, per ESPN research, and went 1 of 6 for -1 passing yards under pressure. In the second half, he went 3 of 5 for 61 yards under pressure, including 1 touchdown pass. Early prediction for next week. After a slow start to his Steelers career, wide receiver Mike Williams will continue the uptick in targets. Williams, who finished with 3 catches for 36 yards on 4 targets, benefited from Pickens' absence Sunday. Pickens, who was inactive after a hamstring injury late in the week, is likely to be back against the Eagles. But Williams showed his value as a field-stretching target. He had a one-handed, third-down snag in the third quarter. Will the Browns find a way to minimize their self-inflicted mistakes? When the Browns took a 7-3 lead in the first quarter, it looked like Cleveland had the formula to win its first regular season game in Pittsburgh since 2003. But that quickly evaporated with several miscues, from quarterback Jameis Winston's interception that led to Pittsburgh's first touchdown to kicker Dustin Hopkins' 2 missed kicks. Cleveland isn't headed to the postseason, but limiting errors could be the difference in pulling off another upset in its next 4 games. Describe the game in 2 words: collective collapse. All sides of the ball played a role in giving up 24 straight points after building a 7-3 lead. Winston continued his trend of interceptions. The defense allowed a Steelers offense without wide receiver George Pickens to generate explosive passing plays, and Hopkins misses ruin productive drives. Early prediction for next week. Tight end David Njoku records a season high in receiving yards. Njoku has received 10-plus targets in the Browns' past 2 games. His season high is 81 yards, and he will face a Chiefs defense that entered Week 14, allowing the second most yards per attempt to tight ends, 9.1. Can the Saints offense regroup without Taysom Hill and possibly Derek Carr? The Saints have scored 26.8 points per game with Hill in the lineup versus just 15.2 without him. Hill went on IR, ACL, this week, and the Saints often struggled against the Giants, particularly in the run game. They'll have to figure out how to succeed without their do-everything player, and potentially without Carr if he's out indefinitely with an injury. Biggest hole in the game plan, the run game. The Saints had their starting offensive line back, but they couldn't get anything going on the ground, with the exception of an 8-yard touchdown run in which Kendre Miller was pushed into the end zone. Miller, Alvin Kamara, and Jamal Williams combined for only 81 yards, and Kamara averaged only 2.6 yards per carry. Early prediction for next week. The Saints didn't fare well in their 3 games without Carr earlier in the season, and they likely experienced some deja vu after he collided with a teammate late in the fourth quarter and left the game. He went to the locker room with a wrist injury and potential concussion. If he's out, the Saints could struggle against the Commanders. How does the latest loss affect coach Brian Daboll's future? This was the Giants' 8th straight loss, and it seems they're finding new ways to lose after their game-tying field goal attempt was blocked in the final seconds. This all reflects poorly on Daboll. As if it wasn't enough, a plane flew over MetLife Stadium prior to the game with a banner directed at Giants owner John Mara that read, "Mr. Mara enough. PLZ fix this dumpster fire." The optics of this and a half-empty stadium aren't good for Daboll and this regime. Sure, the Giants are extremely short-handed, but this type of embarrassment is what generally irks Mara. Eye-popping stat. Quarterback Drew Lock had 0 completions on his first 8 pass attempts. 2 of those 8 passes were drops, but it was still the most consecutive incompletions to start a home game since the Jets' Ken O'Brien on December 15th, 1991, against the Patriots. It only got slightly better from there, as Locke went 6 of 19 for 52 yards in the first half. Most surprising performance, cornerback Trey Hawkins' 3's big day. The second-year cornerback has been buried on the depth chart all season. In fact, the Giants had recalled corners from the practice squad to play over Hawkins. He had the Giants' first interception since week 1, their first interception by a defensive back this season, and was an asset against the run before an injury in the fourth quarter. Will slow starts come back to bite the Eagles eventually? Most likely, if they don't get it fixed between now and the playoffs. The Eagles have been shut out in the first quarter in 10 of their 13 games this season, including this Sunday. They have scored a league-low 17 points in the opening frame, which is unacceptable given the level of talent on the offensive side of the ball. To their credit, they make adjustments well and have often gone on to dominate games. But a high-quality team will eventually make them pay. Describe the game in 2 words: Saquon's record. Barkley set a new franchise mark for single-season rushing yards, moving past LaShawn McCoy, who rushed for 1,607 yards in 2013. He took over first place midway through the fourth quarter and finished the game at 1,623 total. Chance of MVP broke out as his achievement was announced in the stadium. It was Barkley's 9th 100-yard rushing game this season, which is also the most in Eagles history. Biggest hole in the game plan: receiver A.J. Brown was not targeted until the waning moments of the second quarter. After Barkley, Brown has been the team's top offensive player with 4 games of 100-plus receiving yards. He broke open a couple of different times early in the game, but the ball did not come his way. He showed some frustration as a result. Did Bryce Young finally prove he can be the Panthers' franchise quarterback? Young did throw his first interception in 125 attempts. The fact that this is being mentioned shows how well he has been playing. More significantly, he went toe-to-toe against the NFL's best defense in a hostile environment. Young was a drop touchdown catch by Xavier Legette away from getting the win. Stack that on top of his performance the previous 5 games, and there's no doubt the job should be his next season. Biggest hole in the game plan: not accounting for quarterback Jalen Hurts in the run game. The league's worst run defense, allowing 166.9 yards per game, did a decent job of holding down Saquon Barkley, the league's leading rusher. But it gave up too many big runs to Hurts, who had 6 rushes for 58 yards. Describe the game in 2 words: close again. For the 3rd straight week, the Panthers were in it until the end. And it was the second time in 3 weeks that it came against a top team, Week 12 versus Kansas City. This shows how far Coach Dave Canales and his staff have come since the start of the season, when Carolina went 1-7. Are the Vikings really going to let Sam Darnold leave after the season? That's been the guess ever since Darnold signed a 1-year, $10 million contract in March, but it's getting harder to make that assumption. It made sense that rookie J.J. McCarthy would take over as the starter in 2025 once he recovered from his knee injury. Darnold, however, has pushed his game to a new level lately, culminating with a career-best 5 touchdown passes against the quarterback he replaced in Minnesota. He is on pace for a 4,000-yard, 36-touchdown season at age 27. At the very least, the Vikings are going to have a much more difficult set of conversations around their 2025 quarterback room than they were planning. Describe the game in 2 words: fantasy football. Vikings receivers Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison combined to catch 15 passes for 265 yards and all 5 of Darnold's touchdown passes, becoming the second set of teammates in franchise history to each have 100 receiving yards and multiple scores in a game. The others were Hassan Jones and Steve Jordan in 1986. Most surprising performance: kickoff unit. The Vikings entered the game with the NFL's 3rd highest touchback rate, 85.3%, but a rare short kickoff Sunday proved to be a game-changer when linebacker Brian Asamoah forced a fumble midway through the fourth quarter. Will the Falcons bench Kirk Cousins after throwing 2 more interceptions? It seems unlikely. This game was always going to be a tough one for the Falcons to win on the road, and Cousins played better than his 4-interception performance last week. As long as Atlanta remains in the playoff picture and the NFC South is still up for grabs, rookie Michael Penix Jr. will probably remain on the bench. But this has become a legitimate week-to-week question. Describe the game in 2 words: beat themselves. Down a single score in the fourth quarter, wide receiver Ray McCloud fumbled the kickoff return, which led to a Vikings touchdown. The Falcons also had the most penalty yards of any NFL team in a game this season, 127. Plus the Cousins interceptions. Biggest hole in the game plan: the Falcons' defense was once very effective in limiting explosive plays. It needed to do that Sunday against a team with big play wide receivers. Instead, quarterback Sam Darnold threw for 5 touchdowns. Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison had catches of 52 and 49 yards, respectively. Is this season over? Technically, no. The Dolphins likely need to win out and get a little help in order to make their third straight playoff appearance. But their performance Sunday inspired little confidence that they'll be able to do so. 3 of their 4 remaining games are on the road, and their home game is against a mercurial 49ers team. Miami is still alive with a 13.8% chance at the playoffs, independent of other results per ESPN analytics, but it needs to play like its back is against the wall. Describe the game in 2 words: no urgency. In a get-right spot against a listless Jets team, the Dolphins were pushed around for 4 quarters, allowing nearly 7.0 yards per play while converting just 1 of 9 third down attempts. They managed to win thanks to some overtime heroics from Tua Tagovailoa and Jonas Smith, but this did not look like a team with its season on the line. Eye-popping stat: Dolphins cornerback Jalen Ramsey allowed 131 yards and 5 catches on 7 targets as the nearest defender in coverage, according to NFL Next Gen stats. In his defense, a large portion of those yards came on a 42-yard Garrett Wilson catch, during which Ramsey fell down. But it was a rough showing for the perennial Pro Bowler. Will the spiraling Jets win another game? Led by Aaron Rodgers' first 300-yard performance in 35 games, the Jets played one of their best offensive games of the season, and they still managed to choke away a late lead. This was their 4th straight loss, officially eliminating them from playoff contention. Late breakdowns on offense, defense, and special teams resulted in another gut-wrenching defeat. Good teams know how to win close games. The Jets are 0-7 in games decided by 6 or fewer points. Case closed. Most surprising performance: no Breece Hall, no problem. The Jets turned to their rookie running backs, Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, and they delivered as dual threats. They combined for 148 yards from scrimmage, with Davis scoring for the 2nd straight week after being a non-factor for the first 11 games. The future looks bright at running back. What we learn about the QB today: like a snowbird, Rodgers found comfort in the warm weather. The 41-year-old quarterback played his best game since September. Finally healthy, he moved well and connected on 3 passes of 30-plus yards, a rarity this season. He found a nice groove with Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams, but the mojo disappeared late in the game. What stalled the Bucs' momentum after jumping out to an early lead? Starting in the 2nd quarter, the Raiders were able to disrupt quarterback Baker Mayfield's passes to the flats and out routes. He particularly struggled with their zone coverages. Mayfield was 7 of 13 for 84 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception on passes for 5 or fewer air yards, according to ESPN research. His 54% completion percentage on those throws is tied for his lowest with the Bucs. With today's victory and the Falcons' loss, the Bucs now have a 71% chance to make the playoffs, says ESPN research. Biggest hole in the game plan: stopping the running game. The Raiders came into this game averaging just 3.7 yards per carry, dead last in the NFL. Yet running back Sincere McCormick averaged 5.2 yards per carry, with particular success on the perimeter. Most surprising performance: rookie wide receiver Jalen McMillan led the Bucs with 2 touchdown catches after his last touchdown came in Week 1. The Bucs have very much needed receivers outside of Evans to step up, and McMillan did. Sterling Shepard helped too, for catches for 63 yards. Is this now quarterback Desmond Ridder's team? By default. Unless the Raiders elevate practice squad quarterback Carter Bradley, who has been with the team since April. Ridder is the lone signal caller standing. With Gardner Minshew on IR with a broken collarbone and Aiden O'Connell's left leg in an air cast after a sideline push, Ridder is auditioning for the rest of the season and beyond. He passed for 101 yards and completed 12 of 18 passes. Describe the game in 2 words: slow start. The Raiders trailed 14-0 before their offense took their 4th snap. That's not a recipe for success. 3 first-half takeaways by the defense kept Las Vegas within striking range. The team trailed by just 4 points at halftime and were to receive the ball to start the 2nd half, which seemed promising. Alas, the slow start was too much to overcome. Most surprising performance: running back Sincere McCormick, who has mostly been a practice squad player, is looking more like RB1 for a rebuilding Raiders offense. McCormick, taking advantage of injuries to Alexander Madison and Zamir White, rushed for a career-best 78 yards on 15 carries. Does this prove that Coach Doug Peterson hasn't lost the locker room? 1 week after losing quarterback Trevor Lawrence, likely for the season, and going on the road against one of the NFL's worst teams, Some wonder just how motivated the Jaguars would be against the Titans. But the gritty performance, rallying from a 6-0 deficit with 10 points in the fourth quarter, should end the question about whether Peterson has lost the locker room. There's nothing at stake for the Jaguars other than trying to finish a lost season on a positive note. That was apparently enough Sunday. Biggest hole in the game plan. Wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. finally got involved in the third quarter, and the offense finally produced points. Thomas didn't get his first catch until 4:24 remaining in the third quarter. He had no catches on 3 targets until that point, and he touched the ball on 4 consecutive plays. He's the offense's best player and needs to be involved early. What we learn about the QB today. Quarterback Mac Jones threw 2 interceptions, but showed the ability to bounce back in the fourth quarter when he led the Jaguars to 10 points. That included a 31-yard hookup with Thomas on a broken play in which Jones had to scramble out of trouble. Jones had managed just 13 points combined in his first 2 starts, so this is progress in his audition for a chance to compete for a starting spot somewhere in 2025. Can the Titans defense figure out how to get to quarterbacks? The Titans defense finished with 2 sacks, and Arden Key got a pressure to force an interception by Mac Jones. But for most of the day, the Titans could not finish the deal on Jones, giving him time to complete long developing plays on critical drives. Quarterbacks have managed to extend plays by eluding the pass rush and getting the ball to receivers downfield all season. It won't get any easier next week when quarterback Joe Burrow and the Bengals come to town. The Burrow and Jamar Chase connection yielded a league-high 13 touchdowns entering this week. Most surprising performance. Reese filled in admirably after injuries kept Jerome Baker and Kenneth Murray Jr. out of the lineup. Reese was mostly used on special teams and had played just 7 defensive snaps all season, but he played like his helmet was on fire. The second-year linebacker cashed in with an interception and a tackle for a loss on a double reverse. Biggest hole in the game plan, third down defense. The Titans uncharacteristically played a lot of off coverage, costing them against Jacksonville. The Jaguars converted 6 of their 13 third down opportunities. 4 of the conversions came against off coverage, including a 31-yard play by Brian Thomas Jr. late in the fourth quarter that led to the Jaguars' first lead of the day. Will the defensive injuries catch up to the Lions? The injury bug has continued to bite the Lions, as defensive lineman Alan McNeil was ruled out ahead of the second half with a concussion. For now, Detroit has been able to maintain with 11 straight victories, but only time will tell if defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn can continue to adjust. Entering the game, the Lions defense was already shorthanded with 13 defensive players on the injured reserve list. No other team in the league had more than 7 defensive players on injured reserve, per ESPN research, and the Lions also ruled out defensive lineman DJ Reader, shoulder, Josh Paschal, knee, and Levi Onwuzurike, hamstring, before kickoff. Most surprising performance, Lions kicker Jake Bates. Bates was named NFC Special Teams Player of the Month for November earlier in the day and responded with his 3rd game-winning kick of the season. With the game knotted at 31, he nailed a walk-off 35-yarder after game winners at Houston in Week 10 and at Minnesota in Week 7. Eye-popping stat. Lions running back Jahmyr Gibbs ran 19.83 yards to lose 1 total yard on the Lions' 4th, and 1 play late in the third quarter per NFL Next Gen stats. Green Bay would take advantage of that, as running back Josh Jacobs capped off a 4-play drive with a 4-yard touchdown to give the Packers a 28-24 edge. What makes the Packers think a third game versus the Lions will be any different? The Packers want another shot at the Lions, but perhaps after what happened in the 2 losses to them this season, there's reason to think it would be just another fool's errand. Sure, the second meeting was a tooth-and-nail game, but did anyone really think the Packers were going to come up with the defensive stop they needed at the end? The Packers' best path through the NFC might be avoiding the Lions. Describe the game in 2 words: frustrated again. From the pregame shouting match between Coach Matt LaFleur and a Lions fan to another slow start on offense to an inability to stop Detroit on 4th down, it converted 4 of 5 chances, to griping about penalties and non-penalties. The Packers were left exasperated. Early prediction for next week, the Packers will try to get Jaden Reed more involved. He is one of their best receivers this season, but he dropped his only target of the game and played half of the offensive snaps. Since his 113-yard game against the Bears in Week 9, he has just 73 receiving yards combined in the past 4 games.
The Princess of Wales to Gigi Hadid, how ultra-traditional tweed found a new fan base. Once synonymous with the aristocracy, the thoroughly British winter favourite is now in demand more than ever. It is timeless and beyond trends, and generally self-cleaning. Do you have an item of clothing in your wardrobe that is 40 years old? And if you do, is it still good enough, in terms of both style and quality, to wear today? For King Charles, the answer is a resounding yes. The monarch has been wearing the same double-breasted coat since the 1980s. The reason for its longevity? It's made of tweed. A tightly woven woolen fabric, traditionally in plain twill, herringbone or houndstooth patterns, tweed is a winter favourite for its natural insulation. And tweed is everywhere this season, from luxury labels such as Chloe and Margaret Howell to high street brands like Marks and Spencer. But King Charles's preference for tweed is more likely a result of its timeless and sustainable credentials. Since 2008, he has been a patron and founder of the Campaign for Wool, a global initiative run by a coalition of industry groups to support and grow the wool industry in response to the rise of synthetic fibers. Much of the work focuses on engaging consumers through fashion and interiors. Tweed is a 100% natural, renewable, and biodegradable fabric, minimizing the environmental impact of manufacturing, says Martin Crawford, consultant at Anderson & Shepherd, the Savile Row tailor behind King Charles's double-breasted tweed coat. All tweed manufacturers adhere to strict guidelines and very much promote their green credentials. Crawford describes tweed as the first cottage industry and attributes its longevity and popularity to the way it has adapted over the past 200 years. Originating in Scotland and Ireland, tweed began as a practical and functional fabric to keep out the cold, and then evolved to become synonymous with British aristocracy and country life, when shooting and hacking jackets were adopted by the upper classes in the 19th century. Luxury fashion labels were responsible for its contemporary revival. Led by Chanel in the 1950s, the label's iconic tweed jacket remains one of fashion's most covetable and copied items today. Later, in 1976, British designer Vivienne Westwood first worked with Harris Tweed Hebrides on the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland to create a pair of bondage trousers. A decade later, she created the Autumn-Winter 1987 Harris Tweed collection. The two brands have collaborated ever since. In November 2023, Dior creative director Maria Grazia Chiuri visited the Harris Tweed mill to create a line of bespoke fabrics, which became a key part of the Cruise 2025 collection, shown at Drummond Castle in June. The collection was inspired by Mary Queen of Scots and brought artisans from across the Scottish textiles industry together to showcase local craftsmanship. Over the past 15 years, our industry has experienced a surge of interest, particularly the traditional designs and patterns. Ruth Masson, sales and marketing manager at Harris Tweed Hebrides, tells the BBC. From luxury to the high street, consumers seem to be much more engaged with the story around the products they are buying. Our artisanal fabric and its unique production process has allowed us to align with an array of brands, reaching a wider demographic of customers. That reach can sometimes be unexpected. In April, the annual Tweed Run cycling event took place in London, with riders embarking on a 13.5-mile route around the capital, clad in their finest Fair Isle knitwear, tweed suits and bow ties. Now a global event, cyclists duly stop to take tea en route. The name Harris Tweed is protected by legislation under the Harris Tweed Act of 1993, and only fabric produced in the Outer Hebrides, by hand, can bear the famous Orb label. It is hand-woven using 100% British farmed wool and processed in the UK. Masson advises consumers to first look at fabric composition when buying a garment that labels itself as tweed. Not all tweed is created equal, she says. There are significant differences in the quality, fibre sourcing, and production processes that can impact its sustainability. Ultimately, brands committed to sustainability offer certification, provide transparency into their production processes, and use natural, renewable materials. Some tweeds may incorporate cheaper synthetic fibres that do not have the same environmental benefits. There is something else that makes tweed a more sustainable fabric than most: Durability. The tighter it is woven, the more durable it becomes, says Rebecca Early, Professor of Circular Design Futures at University of the Arts London. If you do get moth holes or any damage, it's easy to make a darn repair, and the pattern helps to disguise wear and tear. And because wool is naturally antibacterial, you can air your tweed garment outside. In fact, if you do dry clean tweed, it loses some of its body, so avoid it. It is generally self-cleaning. Many tweed garments are lined, Early explains, giving them structure, which adds to the durability, while protecting your skin against the sometimes prickly texture. Tweed is a fabric that comes from the land, and the natural dye palettes often reflect the regions and landscapes from which it comes. I can always spot an Irish tweed, she says. Having spent her summers for the past 20 years in Kerry, Ireland. Much like Harris tweed, Donegal tweed, from County Donegal in northwest Ireland, has been manufactured for centuries. While both Irish and Scottish tweeds share an almost identical weight of 15 for 16 ounces, the main differences between them, says Crawford, are that Donegal is machine woven, and its random flecks of colour are its distinctive trademark. Early is right. At fashion rental platform Her, there has been a 110% increase on the number of tweed items being rented since September. We have definitely seen an uplift in searches for tweed recently, as well as more textured materials that reflect the preppy countryside trend of now, says Sophie Devlin, fashion director at Her. The influx has focused on red, as well as more classic tonal black and white, with tweed pieces from Nadine Marabi and Montsand having been a big hit for party wear. Tweed's sustainable attributes mean that it is favoured by modern fashion brands that factor in environmental, social, and ethical implications in their collections. London-based brand Baukjen, which is certified B Corp, says its tweed category has grown by 40% compared to last year's Autumn-Winter 2023 collection, with a brown check tweed coat one of the season's best sellers. With its durability and timeless appeal, tweed aligns with consumer demands for stylish investment pieces, says Baukjen design director Natalie Grant. The Baukjen coat may not appeal to purists. It is made from a blend of recycled wool, cotton, and polyester, but it demonstrates that the fabric's reinvention is still going strong after 200 years. Anderson and Shepherd still make shooting suits in heavier tweeds, but demand now comes for lighter tweeds, such as Shetland, at 12-13 ounce, which can be worn all year round in the UK, with the exception of summer. These weights of cloth are super popular, as the jackets can be worn with regular flannel trousers for a timeless look, says Crawford. But they are much more likely to be worn on a weekend with chinos or jeans. Perhaps the best barometer of the direction in which tweed is heading is its celebrity following. King Charles is not the only royal to favour tweed. The Princess of Wales is a fan of Harris tweed, and also has a favourite cobalt blue 90s Chanel tweed jacket that she regularly rewears, together with Gwyneth Paltrow and Madonna. More recently, US model Gigi Hadid has become a fan of the Scottish weave, a sign perhaps that tweed has now truly transcended both national borders and generations.